Hey, good morning, everybody. Today we are in Mark chapter 3, and we have 19 verses to read, but honestly, what caught my eye was in the very first two verses, and it's about what caught Jesus' eye and the eyes of some other people in this particular passage. So let me read you what it says in verses 1 and 2. It says, Jesus went into the synagogue again, and he noticed a man with a deformed hand. Since it was the Sabbath, Jesus' enemies watched him closely. If he healed the man's hand, they planned to accuse him of working on the Sabbath. Now, the first thing that Mark tells us is that Jesus went into the synagogue again. He was a faithful synagogue attender. And we see that wherever Jesus went, there were two groups that followed him. There first were his followers, the ones who were genuinely interested in his message and how different he was from the other teachers and rabbis. And then we find Mark identifies them as Jesus' enemies. And these were the religious leaders of the day. They were the ones who had the people, they had power over the regular people by making sure that they knew that they didn't measure up to God. And they didn't like the following at all that Jesus seemed to be growing. So in these first two verses, we notice that Mark writes this, that Jesus noticed and his enemies were watching. Jesus noticed a man who was in need. And if you read on, we find out that he acts on it and he cares about this guy and he actually helps him out. He heals him. And the others are watching Jesus to see if he breaks their own human-made laws about the Sabbath. Now, to understand this, we need a little bit of background on this. One of the commandments that God gave us was, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. It was meant to be a gift of rest and refreshment for all people. And after all, God created the earth, all creation in 6 days. And then he rested on the seventh day as to establish a healthy pattern for all of us. And in just a few verses earlier, in verse 27 of chapter 2, Jesus says these words. He says, the Sabbath was made to meet the needs of people and not people to meet the needs of the Sabbath. But as often happens over the years, people had taken this commandment and they messed with it, and they added their own personal, precise interpretations about what activities were allowed on the Sabbath and what were not, to make sure that people conformed. For instance, they added interpretations about what was allowed, how far one could walk on the Sabbath and not be in violation. And healing on the Sabbath was definitely forbidden. So let's go back to the story now. And as we see with Jesus' eyes, he saw an obvious need and he met it. But the religious leaders were really distracted by their own legalism and their own agendas, and they didn't see the need. They only cared about controlling Jesus, controlling the people, controlling the situation. So how does this apply to us today? Well, I will confess that when I read this, I realized that there's been times when I've been way too busy with my own agenda. I had a purpose and I knew what I wanted to do, and everything, and I felt it was the most important thing, when right in front of me there was need. It could be someone with a physical need like this man. It could be somebody who simply needs me to listen. It could be something that causes me to change my plans for the day. And my prayer is that God would help me and help all of us to see with the eyes of Jesus, rather than to be distracted by those things that honestly are just not as important. And to have the discernment to know the difference. May we see the world with Jesus' eyes. May we see people with Jesus' eyes. And I pray you have an amazing day.
If these devotional videos are helpful to you, subscribe to our channel and click the notification button so you know when we post a new video. And of course, please share them with others.